From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back to the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your podcast about consumption. We have a special drop for you today. Today is Friday the 13th, and because of that, we are going to be talking about the movie Halloween. Oh, wait, Friday the 13th. So I am John. With me is the authority on Michigan craft beer and hype man and agent to James Wan. Sean, how you doing today?
I am great, John. That caught me by surprise. Yes, co-host, authority on Michigan craft beer, all things Michigan craft beer, and James Wan, unofficial hype man / manager.
Oh no, it's official. So
well, you got word back, huh? He got back to you.
He hit me up on the socials. He said, yes, it's official. So we're going to go right into it today. Like I said, our topic today is Friday the 13th, and we're starting at the beginning of the franchise. We're going all the way back to 1980. This is the monster movie that started the monster that spawned 10 sequels, a reboot. Well, I guess 9 I don't really know what you count Freddy vs. Jason, if it's a sequel, spinoff, whatever.
Yeah, spinoff, probably.
So 9 sequels, a spinoff, and a reboot. This is the original, shot at Camp Nobibusco, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, in Jersey, but more commonly known as Camp Crystal Lake. For those who somehow don't know, one, we will probably ruin this movie for you if you haven't seen it somehow.
It's a 42-year-old movie.
I was going to say, you've only had 42 years. But this is I don't know if this is the first of the genre, but this is certainly the one that made the summer camp slasher-like trope popular. And as much as Halloween might be the slasher that gets credit for slasher movies becoming popular again, I'd say this is the one that really embraced and kind of pushed all the tropes that you see in slasher movies to the next level and really, really ran with them as far as being a reoccurring theme, film after film after film.
I think that this one gets overlooked because Jason's not really in it. I mean, he's in it, but
barely. So this movie's a little different more so than any of the others in the franchise. This movie is almost a whodunit from start till about the third act. We go through the whole movie, a lot of POV shots. Anytime something bad's going to happen, the camera immediately goes to POV shots. You get this weird, somewhere between Jaws and Halloween type soundtrack that is just pushed through the entire movie. Truthfully, in a lot of ways, I love how this movie looks, but if you really look at it from like a big picture, it kind of looks like shit. It's like barely lit through the majority of the movie, but that kind of lends to what a great movie can be on set. Yeah, this movie was made for like $500,000, which obviously that $500,000 went a lot further back in 1980 than it would now, but it's pretty impressive by those standards with it.
Yeah, and I think it's the way that it's lit and being so low budget. Well, low budget's, I guess, a relative term, but being poorly lit, being kind of grainy, everything's pretty grainy. The POV footage, it just kind of adds to the suspense, the tension. You're not quite sure. You know, sometimes the POV that we see is supposed to be, or I'm guessing it's supposed to, well, most of the time it is the killer, and other times it's not. It's just kind of randomly thrown in there. Sometimes you're made to feel, or you feel watching it, that the camera is the onlooker, but it's not always. So you're kind of guessing every time they go to that POV point of view is POV, duh. But every time they go to that POV look, you're always questioning, okay, is this when someone's going to get got, or is this just setting the tension to go further into the next thing to build tension, or the release of tension once a victim is taken care of?
And this movie really does do a great job of building tension. It's hard for me to see that now because I've watched this movie so many damn times that it's one of those, every shot, everything that's coming like minutes before it happens. Like, this is one of the definitive movies that I can put on and go in another room and just play the whole thing in my head and come back and know exactly where, a kill is going to happen when a ridiculous thing, whatever it is, plot point wise. I don't really have to watch this movie to watch this movie anymore. But thinking back to when I had seen it only once or twice, it really did kind of keep you on the edge of your seat, not knowing what's going to happen next, building up on a real, not just tension, but like a sense of doom that's going in there. And it plays off really well because, of course, the big reveal is that, Mrs. Voorhees is the person that's going around killing all these people. But as they're doing these POV shots, people are like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" And they just talk to her because she's a friend of the Christies. They know this chick. She's been around for who knows how long, and it's not odd that she's at the camp until all of a sudden it is odd that she's at the camp.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this in a long before watching it this time. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I know that my friends and I, when we watched it, I know in college we did a Friday the 13th kind of marathon, and we tried to rent them all and watch them all because up until then it was, we didn't see them in the theater, and
Sure.
It wasn't something that necessarily I would have gone out and rented. So you'd catch it on local syndicated TV, Channel 50, Channel 20.
Was it Bob's Trucker, whatever, drive-in theater, or whatever that was on TNT?
Oh, Joe Bob Briggs.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Yeah, I didn't have cable, so I didn't get to see it even that much. But it would be, Channel 20, Channel 50.
We had cable in the less than noble way.
Oh, okay. I hear you. Might be having it like that again.
Right.
So we would just catch it during, we might catch it at the middle. You might watch it late night, catch it at the end. I don't think when I saw it originally, it was one of those things where it was like, oh, this isn't even Jason. Like, this movie, what is this? This movie sucks. Like, why am I going to watch this? I am watching Friday the 13th because I want to see Jason. But when they make the movie, they don't have probably that entire roadmap built out because they don't even know if they're going to make money on this movie. It's just, hey, let's film this movie and hope we can make some bucks off of it. Watching it now as an adult and watching it with all this other experience of horror movies, yeah, is it a little bit kind of cheesy? Is it super scary? No, but it does really, it almost does fit into that kind of horror, thriller, suspense kind of movie more than just a slasher. There is obviously gory kills and there's stuff like that have kind of become the trademark of slashers nowadays, or modern slashers, or even slashers that followed it. But at the time, it was just had so much tension built into it. It doesn't really feel like it's like the prototypical kind of slasher because it's not quite as gory. It's not really, I was expecting to see more nudity than what we saw. There's only a couple scenes that have it, and it was kind of surprising that it was not as much TNA as I remembered it having, or that the series has kind of become known for.
Yeah, well, they definitely picked up on that. That really starts picking up, if I remember right, in the third movie when they really kind of turn the volume up on that. Yeah, this one, I mean, this is one of those movies that really does well with less is more and that theory on it. Because again, you get some really good kills throughout this movie. Of course, this is a movie featuring the effects of Tom Sweeney, and I actually wrote as a note Tom fucking Sweeney, because if Tom Sweeney's working on your movie, you're at least going to have a good looking movie. Like, that's should go without saying.
Yeah, it carries a lot of cachet. His name carries a lot of cachet.
Absolutely. And truthfully, some of the effects in this haven't translated well to the HD era. Like, looking at them now in whatever they're scaled up to, probably 1080p or whatever, you can really see, like, in the first kill where they cut the girl's neck, like the prosthetic that's on her, when they arrow Kevin Bacon, like his neck all of a sudden is like a foot longer than it was before. So all that stuff really does stick out, but even with that, it still has this great, I don't know if realism is the right word because it's not very realistic, but it's got this great practical effect quality to it that you just don't see at this point. And it's great seeing it because, to me, I look at it's one of the reasons why I like Tom Sweeney's work in general. Is any of his big titles like that, you really see how it not only was cool in that movie, but it pushed the industry forward for what would come after it. So the kills in this, they're, by Friday the 13th standards, they're not overly inventive. They're pretty straightforward. And, a knife, the axe is pretty brutal, but, there's some good brutal kills, but it's not like when you start seeing some of the crazy stuff that Jason starts doing in the later movies. It is pretty straight to the point. It's also makes you kind of question the strength of Pamela Voorhees, which, I mean, there's flat out times where I was watching this, I'm like, I don't buy that Betsy Palmer could force using the Kevin Bacon example, I don't buy that she's going to force an arrow directly through a mattress and then through a man's throat while holding him down with one hand. That seems unlikely to me.
Yeah, I think the way that those kills specifically happen, the first one, the knife across the throat and the arrow through the neck, it's looking at it, like you said, it doesn't really hold up great to HD, because the color looks really kind of off. Obviously the skin isn't the real skin color, and there's just things that
The blood looks
they don't.
great. The skin is what
Yes,
looks
it
off.
does.
Hmm.
Yeah, and to be honest, but until you said that, I didn't really even think about it. I watched pretty much after I watched this, or right after it, I watched that the movies that made us on Netflix, that series that they talk about different movies of the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, and I watched the Friday the 13th one because I had only watched like half of it before watching this movie, and that was months ago, and they kind of go through the special effects, and that's when not until watching that did I really notice how off some of the coloration looked. I mean, I didn't think the arrow head through Kevin Bacon's neck. I think the thing that I'm trying to get at is they happen so quickly in the movie, especially not seeing it for a long time. It is pretty convincing, that it kind of happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, holding Kevin Bacon's head down, pressing a arrow through a mattress and spine, it's not
Right.
really going to work that way, but it happened. They happen so quickly. The editing is really good. There's only a few places in the movie where the editing kind of looked a little bit off, and it overall, I mean, it's pretty, I thought special effects wise, it was like pretty good, especially for the time.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
not talking,
for
it's
sure.
all like you said, it's all practical. There's no CG in this.
Right.
So, and
Right.
the way they did some of the effects, when you find out how they did it, it's like, oh, that's actually pretty inventive.
Well, and there's some of them too that you can see in the film that stick out, like the big climax to one of the climaxes to the end of it, where they cut off Pamela's head. You could see the like sticks that are holding the mannequin head on top of the torso, like clear as day, especially in newer cuts of the movie where it's been upscaled. Going back to the Kevin Bacon scene, which might be the most iconic kill in this movie, let alone knowing that like they had to like manually force like blood out of the tube with, just by blowing into it because of something getting clogged or whatever. And that freaked Kevin Bacon out, making him react more naturally. That all lends to some level of realism in this movie. I struggle to say realism because I'd like to think that if there was a person going around murdering kids at a camp, that it wouldn't. I don't think realism is really what would be at play, but it looks good for what it is. This is also a movie in true 80s fashion. This one especially, whenever I watch it, I'm always like, man, people were fucking creeps back in the 80s. Like adults and like creeping on they never really say how old these kids are. You always hear they're teenagers, but are they 18? Are they 16? Like you never really know. But I can't remember his name now. The like main counselor, the guy that goes to the diner later.
Oh, the blonde guy. He's like the head. He's one of the Christies. He's Steve Christie or whatever his name is.
Yeah, that's it. I'm looking at his picture right now. As soon as Alice gets there, he's like trying to pick her up, and it's like that's fucking creepy. It's funny because you get creeps throughout this entire franchise, but most of it is like creeps on other creeps. And this movie's a guy too, like the kid with the arrow at the beginning who is wearing the football jersey and damn near kills a girl.
Ned.
Trying to flirt with, Ned. You see it right from, like, there's those kinds of creeps sprinkled through this entire franchise from start to finish. But at least you're in the right age group then. It's when you see the counselors that are presumably twice these people's age just creeping on these kids. It's like, oh, so like pedophilia was somewhat okay back then, or
they just look the other way,
right?
Yeah, I would say that I get the feeling that they're supposed to be like on college break, and not spring break, but like summer break. They're probably college freshmen, sophomores, juniors, around that age. And I would say probably like 18 to 21. But yeah, the one you mentioned, Creeps, the one that really kind of got me, and I've started, when we talk about these movies, I start making an I love, I hate, and meh kind of list. And I would say that the only thing that I put in, I don't even know if I hate, I think I put meh. I think it was a meh. Yeah, meh was Ned. He's just such a creep. He's just like, I don't know, just a weird dude. You're just kind of waiting for him to get his for whatever reason. He never does anything wrong. He's just like the nerd of the group. And you can see he's got like the crush on one of the girls. I don't remember which one, but
Alice.
Was it Alice? I wasn't sure if it was her or the other one. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, when's something going to happen here? And he gets his just desserts, but I mean, he didn't deserve to get killed, but he's just kind of an annoying character.
Standards, he deserves to get killed. There's all these movies, whether it's Friday the 13th or any of these, there's always like, usually it seems like it's more and more like the more modern these movies gets, but there's always at least 1 to like 5 people that are like, well, I'm okay with him dying already, right go. As far as other things that I would put in the meh category, strip Monopoly, total meh. That
It'd take forever.
It would take forever, and it doesn't seem like it would get you very far.
No, they take off like it's not even the way that they play it. The way that I kind of feel like they play it is basically you get a property, you buy the property, and then you land on the property again. Somebody else lands on the property, and they have to remove one item. It's like I remove a boot. Well, at that point, it's going to take like you're going to be playing for hours.
Yeah, it's total cocktease of game, if that. But
yeah.
And they say even when they like break up the game because of rain, which whatever, the like least stressed person is still wearing like pants and a bra. Like it's like, all right, we didn't get very far with this game.
Yeah, they kind of when they preface strip Monopoly, you're thinking like, oh, these guys, this is where they're gonna get. This is where a lot of skin's gonna come into this movie, and it really doesn't. I have to say that this takes place. Well, it came out in '80.
Right.
Hobos in the 1980s, they dressed nicer than some of the people that I see like when I used to go into the office. Ralph? Crazy Ralph dresses nicer than like 90% of the people I would see in the office when I used to go into the office.
So I just started in a new office, and that's not the case where my current office is, but in my previous office, I would 100% agree with you. Crazy Ralph doesn't wear zebra print yoga pants.
He has a vest. He's got a nice dress shirt. He's got slacks on, a hat.
He's a messenger of God, so he has to be dressed appropriately.
True. Pious.
So, right.
Just very pious.
Crazy Ralph's one of my favorite parts of this movie, too, because he's very much so a horror movie trope, but he's a great horror movie trope, and he's one of the more entertaining ones. And he is crazy, I guess, but as far as crazy guys go in a movie, he's got a great look to him as far as what they're trying to push across. He does look nuts, but not so nuts that you're like, even though they try to arrest him, like you don't feel that he necessarily is. It's more or less like move along, Ralph. You're
right.
not
right. Go back to bed, Ralph. You're drunk.
Right. I do like how he like manifests himself inside of a pantry in the middle of the camp
just out of nowhere.
Right.
He just makes his way. That's 20 miles.
Right.
It's 20 miles, right? Because the girl at the beginning of the movie needs a ride. They tell her it's 20 miles. The guy driving the dump truck.
Twice over. Dump truck. And then
he drops her 10 miles and then she takes 20 miles in the Jeep.
Right. Well,
so this
probably
bum
19
on his
miles.
bike. Okay, well, that's true. Yeah, she doesn't make it all the way. This bum on his bike, he rides 20 miles and like the blink of an eye appears in some pantry.
Undetected.
Right. Nobody sees him. Of the 6 or 7 counselors, nobody sees him. Slips in.
He's in like the main cabin. He's right at... Ew. Now he is crazy now. If he's eating dry mac and cheese,
just out of the box.
Yeah, no, that's rough. Better off with some Cheez-Its.
I mean, he keeps himself kempt. He didn't shit his pants. Doesn't have throw up on his shirt or anything. He takes care of himself. He's a bum, but he's a respectable bum.
They never really say he's a bum. They just say he's crazy.
That's true.
Like
but I mean, you can kind of infer that he's probably a vagrant of some sort.
Well, yeah. Let's see. What else is meh or good in this movie? I mean, there's a lot with it. Aside from, how do you feel about the reveal of Mrs. Voorhees?
The reveal that she's the killer, or just that she kind of strolls up and she's like, "Oh, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, close family friend of the Christies."
Well, that's pretty much where they reveal that she's a killer. But yeah, just I
mean, just out of the blue. She's not in the movie at all. Outside of that, she just kind of like pops up. She's, the girls wants to leave. It's raining, I think. Is that when she pulls up in the Jeep? Because they must only have one vehicle in this movie. It's a Jeep. Because multiple people drive this Jeep.
Yeah, because Ned comes back and that's when he's like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" That he's in the rain. He comes out of the Jeep in the raincoat, and that's when he meets his. But you don't really get revealed that it's her at that point. You just know that he's talking to her.
Yeah, it's Steve.
Was that Steve? I thought that was
from the diner, right? He gets his trailer, or he gets the
Steve.
Jeep stuck, or the cop comes and picks him up. I don't really know how Steve gets dispatched.
Well, he comes
when
back,
he comes out of the cabin. You're right.
He comes back from the diner. He stops at like the sign where Crystal Lake is, and starts talking to who we find out later is Pamela. And if I remember right, isn't he the one that gets like nailed up to the door or something like that, or is that Steve?
That might be the other. That might be one of the other counselors that makes it. Mrs. Voorhees shows up.
Right.
She's basically revealed to be the killer, and that's like the last 15 minutes of the movie. Once it's all downhill. That once she's introduced in the movie, just in general, not even as the killer, but just as a character, the movie like warp speed to the end.
Oh,
like, hey guys, we're running out of time here. We got to finish this. We got to wrap this movie.
I wonder. So this was totally missed on me for years, but I wonder how many times we saw a female killer in a movie like this at that point in time. I don't want to go as far as to call it groundbreaking. I mean, there's plenty of like stories of how Betsy Palmer did this movie because she needed a new car, and she flat out told Sean Cunningham this movie is shit. So I don't want to go as far as to call it groundbreaking, but looking back on and going through all the different slasher movies I've seen over the years, I can't really think of another movie where a middle-aged sweater-wearing woman is the mass murderer killer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's true. I think it's probably one of the few, especially around that time. And the movie is very feminist, kind of heavy. You know, the one that survives is a woman.
Right.
The ones that puts up the biggest fight. I think the ones that put up the biggest fights in general are the women, and the men just kind of get dispatched really quickly.
Well, that goes with the final girl trope. I've never heard of a final boy trope.
Yeah, true. But when did that? I mean, did that start?
That started with Halloween, I would think.
Halloween was 79, right?
Yeah, because this movie.
Yeah, because this movie is something where they wanted to try and copy the formula.
They essentially went in with the intention to rip off Halloween. So you had that. What other ones would? So you can't. Psycho was before this, which would have been a slasher. There's no final girl in that. I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking of right now. But this is This is also like one of the weaker. Like Alice isn't that interesting of a character as far as the final girl goes. She kind of sucks.
Yeah, she just kind of seems to stumble through it, make her way to the end.
And I mean, it sucks that she had such a shitty real life experience after this movie, which kind of ruined her for going into much more of the others. I mean, she's in 2 for like a heartbeat, but
right. Yeah, at the very beginning, right? Kind of recap what we've already seen.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, after this movie, Adrienne King, or the actress that played Alice, had a stalker that was very, very extremely obsessive about her, and it kind of turned her off to acting altogether, to the point where he was showing up at her house and she had to get the cops involved and all kinds of craziness like that. So after this movie, she kind of became reclusive as a result of it, which I guess who can blame her, especially at that time. They never really got a chance to develop her quite like you would a Nancy from Elm Street,
Elm Street.
Or Jamie's character Laurie in Halloween. Like there's no chance to do that because she opted out of anything more than her one scene in the second movie. She still gets the upper hand in this movie, but she kind of comes out of it at the end, I guess, justifiably seem kind of befuddled. And to be honest, like the way they kind of end this movie is kind of my biggest thing I don't like about this movie.
Which part of the end? The part where it was all a dream, or that kind of thing, or the...
This is a weird movie in the sense that this is, of all the major horror franchises, this is the only one I never hear anyone say that this is their favorite of the series. And with every other horror franchise, it's almost unanimously the first movie of the series is the one that is, the grail of the series. There's debate as to which ones come after that you could say is the best of the Fridays. But even for me, like it's not even close. This movie is the first movie where I truly remember a jump scare being done well, at least for me, and I'm assuming for you. When I saw this movie the first time, there was no internet, there was no none of that shit that what was going to happen at the end. So when you finally see Jason pop out of the water, it's a real, oh my god, holy shit, what the fuck was that? It freaked you out the first time you saw it. It was the perfect execution of a jump scare.
Well, on top of that, he doesn't look like a normal kid.
No.
It's not just some little kid that he fell in the water, Jason drowned. He's like malformed as it is and kind of looks freaky in general. And so when he pops out of the water, you're like, what the fuck is going on here?
And they barely say the name Jason in the movie. I think they say his name like 2, maybe 3 times prior to that. So it's infrequent enough, especially on a first watch. Like you might be not even realize what the hell's going on with this mutant zombie rotted corpse that's coming out of the water. So my opinion, I feel very strong about this. I don't know why they didn't just end the movie with her getting pulled into the lake and being dead. Especially with how they started, which granted, they didn't know that they were going to do a second movie, let alone how they would start a second movie. Especially when we consider how the second movie starts. Would it have been my favorite in the series? Probably not. I really love a couple others that we'll get to at a later time. It would have been such a better and more classic ending if he pulled her into the lake and you just cut to faded out from a calm lake.
Yeah, fade to black. Yep.
fade to black from that, as opposed to waking up and like, well, we didn't find a boy. Like, stop that shit. Like you literally just weaken the end of your movie. And I'm not aware of any like official cut that doesn't have that like dream, star wipe ending. I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Star wipe.
Yeah. Yeah. Woo. I'm sure it's out there somewhere on the internet where someone just cut it out for whatever reason. But I mean, if it's at this point, it doesn't really matter. Like I could just hit stop at that point too. And
yeah,
but to me, that's the biggest thing that I don't like about this movie is it ends about 3 minutes too late.
Yeah, I'd say it was about 3 minutes. Yeah. To agree with you, it would be totally effective for them just to cut it right there. It would actually, like you said, make it probably a stronger ending, because then you're like, well, what happened? Right. Rather than, oh, it was a dream. That just seems a little bit more of a weak kind of ending where you could have just built this mythos of this character. I mean, they do, but it would have made a stronger kind of impression afterwards.
It's not to downplay Jason, because obviously you have 11 other movies that feature Jason quite prominently. So no one like rarely thinks of Pamela Voorhees as the first thing. If you say Friday the 13th and you're talking about the movies, I can't
she's
think of
not the first thing that pops into your mind. Yeah.
Right. She might be second or third, but she's typically not first. So it's not like they did Jason a disservice, but I think if they cut that ending there, people might talk about it more in the same. I think it might be held in the same esteem as like how Halloween is looked at or how Nightmare is looked at. Those first movies that were really truly game changers, and Friday was that. Look at what it spawned. You can't say that it wasn't a game changer with how many these damn movies they made. But like I say, it really just kind of blue balls you on the whole ending of the movie.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also a hindsight is 2020 kind of scenario. If they knew that they were going to make more in this franchise, not so much then, and probably not at all then, but nowadays everything is built into a franchise. Everything is made, and they've already got like a plan for 3 more movies to come out, or 2 more movies to come out, and the first movie bombs, and we never see any of the other stuff because they don't want to put any money towards making these other movies. Whereas this is like the exact opposite. They had one movie plan. They have no idea that there's going to be any kind of thing going on after it. The movie does so well, and they're like, well, shit, now we have to make one of these every year. And I think if they knew that it was going to be as successful, they wouldn't have had the ending that they did, or they probably wouldn't have even started with, well, it's a built-in origin story, right, at this point.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going to say, like, this movie came out just barely, or the second movie came out less than a year from the first movie. They made, of the 12 Friday the 13th movies, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 8 of them were made in between 1980 and 1990. So, they might not have known for sure, but they sure had that like bolt in the chamber ready to go to make another movie. And much like Halloween, their original plan wasn't Jason. In fact, we've talked about it before. Sean Cunningham has always been against the idea of Jason, but because this was another series that was supposed to go into the whole anthology realm and do a different thing, for each Friday the 13th that they were going to do, which I would have loved to see. It's one of the things that it's one of those ideas that kind of came up a lot in that decade, that you think about the things where they did do that, like Tales from the Crypt, Twilight Zone, Creep Show. Any of those anthology series are generally pretty damn cool. Granted, Tales from the Crypt was more 90s than 80s. I think it would have been interesting to see if they if Cunningham, shouldn't say let, who, for all I know, he just didn't want to do it. But if that was what they really did, it would have been interesting to see where the series would have gone. But it does make you wonder again, if this came, like I said, this is just barely less than a year, but if this came out on May 9th of 1980 and they had another one out on May 1st of 1981, that makes it, well, as soon as this thing hits theaters, they're right back at the lake, shooting whatever, like getting people running away from a POV camera.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned the anthology thing, because it's kind of a sign of the times nowadays. Like, you might get anthology TV shows, and that's even really rare. I guess Heroes was probably an anthology, but American Horror Story. Yeah, I mean, there's not that many, all things considered, because I guess they want to wrap these people up under these contracts.
If we get more of them, you could throw those Fear Street movies into an anthology.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if I want more of those, but it could fall under that. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to this? Like, am I missing anything?
No, I think we kind of covered it. I was just going to say that going back to the panel of Voorhees part, and I think you already hit this, but I think it was probably pretty revolutionary to have, number one, have a woman be the killer, number two, a middle-aged woman be the killer, and the mother, of a grieving mother, basically, or a one off the rails kind of mom after losing her child, be the killer. That's kind of three pretty unique. Not strikes in a positive way.
It's almost plausible though. Like, if I don't even know if kids have summer camp now. I don't think they really do, probably because of movies like this.
I think it's pretty rare. I think you got to be out in New Jersey or,
But let's just say, areas. For the sake of argument, if you heard some kid got bullied to death on a soccer team, would you be shocked if like some mom went and like started offing soccer players randomly?
These days, no, I would not be surprised if anything like that happened. Yeah, if I heard anything like that, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, so I mean, it almost, and again, who knows, maybe back in 1980 it wasn't plausible at all, but at this point it certainly feels plausible that something like this is conceivable. Now, when you get to the mutant zombie reanimated, space ninja son.
Corpse of your, right.
Okay, we're off the rails here as far as more entertaining, but off the rails for that. But no, it wraps up nice. I do think this is a classic. I mean, on the Dewey Pod Monster hot dog scale, I'd probably give this one 7 out of 10 hot dogs. I don't know where you would
go. You're going a linear scale this time, huh?
I don't like the banana part. Hot dogs and bananas don't play well to me.
No?
I'd say it's probably in that 7 out of 10 hot dog scale. If you're a collector of, like me, I still buy physical media mostly because I want to have the copy, and it's as much about a decor thing as it is about having the movie. This is one that, if you like horror movies of any kind, I don't know how you don't have this in your collection, because it, we were talking Mount Rushmore last time about directors and stuff. As far as like Mount Rushmores of horror franchises, this has to be on there.
Yeah, I don't know if Cunningham himself goes up on the mountain, but I think that this movie franchise definitely is.
Oh yeah,
especially if we're going, funneling so far down into slashers, this is easily top 3. I mean, right? We got Nightmare, we have Friday the 13th, and we have Halloween.
I'd put it top 2, mostly because I like Nightmare 1, but I mean, there's arguments for all the sequels, I guess. Maybe not some of the ones at the end, but they never got anywhere close to as entertaining for me as what the first one was. Freddy's best line is probably in 3 with the "Welcome to Prime Time, bitch," when he, shoves her in the TV. But I mean, as a whole, those movies, maybe this is just me, but I thought those movies got real cheesy real quick and kind of got cartoony real quick. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with those, I guess, but we're talking horror movie franchises and that whole. I'd rather watch the Scream movies than watch the Nightmare movies if I'm going to have a marathon of them. I'd rather watch maybe not Texas Chainsaw. Those get pretty goofy too.
2 especially starts to kind of go off the rails a little bit, but it's fun.
I actually think 2 is the best of the whole franchise. I haven't watched the new one yet, but I've heard not anything great about it. But at least 2 is so off the rails that it's almost
wraps back around,
right? Where 1's a whole different level of film altogether. But again, that's a story for a different episode. So
yeah, I mean, I think for Friday the 13th for this one, I would say I'd give it like 14 hockey masks out of 21 machetes. So I think it. Well, what would that be? That'd be no. We got to do something else, because 14 out of 21 isn't great. That's not even 50%.
That's over 50%. 14 out of 21?
Yeah, not much. Not much.
7 out of 10 isn't much over 50%.
Yeah, true. I'll agree with you. I'll say 7 machetes out of 10 hockey masks. I think this one...
I like how you just flipped it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the hell I just said. I do think it's a good movie, and I think looking at it on its own, going back and watching it now, it kind of does hit a little bit differently than it did as a kid. Like I said, being disappointed that it wasn't Jason.
Sure.
Hearing all this stuff about Friday the 13th, you finally get to see a Friday the 13th movie. It doesn't even have Jason in it. A little disappointing, but I think overall as a horror movie, it really sets the table as to how the series is going to go. It's a good starting effort, I think. Having hindsight and being able to watch it and say, "Oh, cool, this movie's over. I can go start the next one," and then after that, the next one. It makes it much better, in my opinion. If it was a standalone, if I would have seen this in the theater and then heard, "Oh, the next one's coming out," I would have said 2 would probably be the better of the other 2, and then after that, 1 would probably really quickly fall down the ranks. But viewing it on its own, I think it's a really good thriller, suspense, kind of horror, a little bit of the slasher, but I feel like it's a good horror movie overall. it's looking at it on its own merit.
Well, even with it falling down the ranks, it doesn't fall that it's. I mean, I'm not going to go through and rank all those movies right now. That again, that's a
yeah, that's for another time.
That's a rant for a different time. But I'd probably put it somewhere in the somewhere around 4 or 5 as far as like if I were to just ballparking it out of 4 or 5 out of 12 on the high end, which I mean is certainly respectable. But
yeah, for sure,
it is. That's to me still the weirdest thing about this franchise as a whole is that its initial chapter is the one that just. I don't want to say it gets overlooked, but it's never thought of in the same light as, again, some of the other entries where, well, you get Jason. But that's going to do it on the... Well, am I missing anything? Do we got anything else to add on this?
No, I think we pretty much said what had to be said.
All right, well, that's going to do it on this one. Again, this is a special one-off drop for Friday the 13th. We might do these again for other, holidays, and I do consider Friday the 13th a holiday, so we're going to hook you up on this one. In the meantime, our normal release will go back on Tuesday morning, so make sure to check those out. Follow us on all the socials. You can always find us at Dewey Pod Monster. If you want to leave us a message, you can go to Anchor FM/Dewey Pod Monster, and there's an option to leave a message there. And if you want, we can even play it and include it in the show. Sean, what do you got going on where you want to plug your plugs on this real quick?
Yeah, just you can find me at, I was going to say Dewey Pod Monster. You can find me at Dewey Pod Monster. If you find me at Draft Therapy, you can find out my YouTube channel. I talk about Michigan beer. I'm the self-professed expert, number one authority on Michigan beer. I already forgot what I call myself. You can find out more at drafttherapy.com or specifically youtube.drafttherapy.com.
Your duties of hyping up James Wan is taken away from your duties of being the craft beer authority of Michigan. Or whatever.
Yeah, I'm slipping. James Wan duties are taking up too much of my time.
That dick. All right, well, we're going to wrap this one up. This is meant to be a little bit shorter of an episode, but we will talk to you in the next couple days. Have a good weekend, and go watch some horror movies.